artists and animators. Chuck Jones famously described the job of an animator as acting with a pencil, and in this live stream discussion, we invited two industry professionals to discuss topics around subtle acting in modern 2D animation. Eden Tim is a 2D animator, college instructor, and director at WildBrain Studios, while Rebecca Kartzmark is a full-time animator working at Wildcrats, whose previous credits included Hilda, The Ghost and Molly McGee, and Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure, which are all really cool shows. This discussion will cover topics such as what subtle character animation can convey, tips and techniques for improving acting and performances in animated characters, and your favorite examples of subtle character animation. So, welcome to the live stream, Eden and Rebecca.
Heyo.
Hello.
Hello, hello. So, I think to get started, we should start with some introductions. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your most recent role on a production and what your day-to-day in that role looks like? And we'll start with you, Rebecca. What was your most recent role, and what does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, so currently I am working at Wildcrats. They are a studio based in Ottawa. I always say, do you remember the show Zibumufu? Because that's usually how I get people to be like, oh, I remember that. Yeah, so they started doing 2D animation, I think roughly 7 years ago. We're currently on season 7. But the shows before then, it was all done at Mercury Filmworks. It was The Ghost of Molly Miki, Hilda. I did season 2 and the movie. Tangled, the series, which you can see on my screen here. And then what else did I work on? Oh yeah, the Mickey series. I worked on that as well. But I know with Tangled and Hilda, I definitely learned a bunch of subtle animations and really see that less can be more.
And Eden, what is your current role or most recent role in a production, and what does your day-to-day in that role look like?
Yeah, I'm Eden. I'm currently directing action adventure comedy with some folks at WildBrain Studios in Vancouver. Can't say what it is. It's under NDA, but it's been a blast. My day-to-day directing changes based on how far along we are in production. Currently, we're in post-production. Animation's just wrapping up, and we are moving into music and sound effects. But every day is very chaotic and fun. Right now, we're dealing with a lot of hearting tests, which is like epilepsy tests. So we're trying to navigate that with a smaller crew. Directing's been a blast. Got to learn a ton about scripts and writing and making sure what is written in the script carries all the way to the bitter end of animation and doesn't get lost along the way. So all that subtlety that the writer spends their time and passion into writing into the script, making sure that that stays protected until the end of the show for it to air.
Well, that sounds really cool, and I hope I have a chance to ask you about that in the future.
Yeah.
Eden, how would you define subtle character animation, since that's today's topic?
So for me personally, subtle character animation, like on the most base level, is like the small nuance, the micro expressions. But I oftentimes run into situations where a character is like big and bombastic and people struggle to get subtle acting out of them that's like very character based, that doesn't feel out of character. So subtle acting to me is not only like how small the little like eye twitches or glances are, but also like paying attention to the subtleties of how long it takes a loud character to react, to break, when they go quiet, when they go big, and all of like the nuance and subtlety in their history with the other people on screen, their like status in the world that they live in, all of those little things that aren't explained to the audience, but you pick up through how they behave around specific people in specific situations. That's what subtle acting is to me. So you can have a big, bombastic, loud character, but making sure you pay attention to the nuance makes it feel more authentic and rich.
No, that's a really good point. And Rebecca, what's your opinion about like the definition of like how would you define subtle character animation?
For me, it's definitely like the eyes and mouth is super important, and like listening to the audio and what you can use in that audio to like help your scenes become stronger. Um, Micro expressions as well, but also like you said, like what how they act towards other people, because like there could be a character that is normally like outgoing, but then maybe there's another character that appears in the shot that they're actually a little were anxious about, but they're not like, oh dear, like kind of like that. They're like, oh boy, but it's like they're trying to hide that they're in fact uncomfortable. Or maybe they're hearing something that that they don't like hearing, and they're trying their best to keep a straight face, but you can definitely tell that they're not comfortable in the situation. Also, I find subtle animation can be harder than full on action. I know like there's some scenes where I would try subtle animation and just it was hard because it's you gotta convey so much emotion with such little movement, and
Mhm.
at times I'll do it. And after I animate, I'm like, this looks stupid, and you gotta like delete it and try again.
Oh no.
Sometimes I find you have to be in the right mood too.
Yeah.
I like if I'm ever angry, I find that's when my scenes are like great. Is like because I'm so upset at like the world, or I'm like stupid, and I'm like putting in the my energy into my scenes, and then afterwards I will get like, "Hey, that scene came out great," and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Thanks, I was really angry," but
Yeah. I've been there.
yeah,
You know, one thing I found really interesting is, like you mentioned, the characters' feelings that you're trying to capture in those scenes, and I think like that is a really good thing to like focus on too in this discussion is like making those things that are internal to this character who doesn't exist external.
hmm
Yeah.
So Rebecca, I wanted to ask you, where do you find references for animating subtle expressions, and do you have advice for filming expressions that you're trying to capture in a scene?
okay. So for me, I hate filming myself. I it's weird because like whenever I'm acting, if I need a mirror, I'll use it.
Mhm.
I don't like using the camera, and I know a lot of people don't like using cameras. So I will always say, for me, like back when I was working on Tangled, I was a junior. So what I would always do is I would always look at the senior stuff and see like what they're doing and why it works. And I remember just studying all the shots and just studying a lot of movies too.
Mhm.
Um, like just really if it's a slow shot of a person just talking, just watch them, just go over the scene over and over again. And I love QuickTime because like you can go frame by frame and really just study. I would say don't try to copy exactly what you see. I
Mhm.
did that mistake a lot in the beginning, and then I would get frustrated because I'm like, oh, it doesn't look exactly like how this shot is. But I would definitely start conveying like I really liked how Ness would draw like animate the eyes, so I would not like exactly copy the eyes exactly, but definitely push my drawings to look more expressive. Um, Also, I would just if I don't have a mirror, I kind of would like touch my face to feel like what muscles would be like expanding, and it's like I can kind of see how it would look. But yeah, like I just know a lot of people, myself included, don't like being recorded. So it's not mandatory for me at least.
Mhm.
No, that's interesting to note. And I know before that we started the discussion, you wanted to credit the artist who was responsible for animating this scene. Do you want to just say who the artist was? Who was the animator on this one?
Yeah, so his name is Ness. From what I could tell, he doesn't have social media, which is probably the smart thing to do. He also, if you just Google Tango spinning scene, there's a shot where there's a song sequence and there's like a really
From
cool,
Nothing Left to Lose, right?
nothing left to lose. It's like the 360 shot. He was the one that did that, I believe. Yeah, I think if this is his shot, that's also his shot, I believe. It's either Ness or Julia were the ones that I would reference a lot. And then I don't know who that shot is, but I really liked this shot from the music video.
And Eden, I want to ask you, do you use video reference? And if you do you have advice for filming expressions that you're capturing?
When I'm animating myself, I don't often use video reference just because I'm similar to Rebecca, where I'll just kind of like act it out and feel it out. And ideally, there's a mirror around me so I can like run through the action over and over again without getting into my head about setting up a camera and making sure it's framed right. But I have had to film video reference for other people. And I think if you're planning on like leading people in the future, you kind of have to lead by example sometimes. And so starting to film yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, helps it make it so much easier when you have to film for someone else. Because it's, for me, it was a lot more embarrassing. But once you get into it, it's like, stop caring too much about how the staging works. Ideally, the staging would match the scene exactly. But what you're trying to do is get the acting. And for like a good animator and artist, they can look at a character or a visual reference and like adjust it to fit the composition as long as the main body mechanics and expression mechanics are there. So I think if you're just getting into it, do something small, don't show anybody, and just like break the ice with yourself. Personally, I prefer a mirror and not recording myself too much, but you kind of have to sometimes. For finding video reference, similar to Rebecca, I'll watch a lot of movies. I make sure to ask not just like my supervisors or my directors or like the showrunner or writer what their character reminds them of, but also like my team members, because I find that like if I'm dealing with like an antagonist villain character and I'm like, ooh, who is this character like in this show? Everyone will start ping-ponging ideas of like, oh, that character would be this character in this world. And then I just start looking up character acting from that and trying to build a whole reference library. Because like live action stuff is great, but sometimes you're dealing with characters with way less visual detail. And it's really hard to convey a lot with little information, like Rebecca said earlier. Like I worked on a Charlie Brown Peanuts movie, One of a Kind Marcy, and like Charlie Brown has minimal facial features, Marcy has even less. So finding characters in other 2D things that also had minimal facial features that people felt like Marcy helped kind of guide me along the line. And then I would reference it back to Charles Schultz's artwork constantly, because you don't want to deviate too far from the character themselves.
Yeah, those like comic strip era cartoon characters are really interesting because they're so simple, but also you can project a lot onto them. So I wonder, like, do you find that like simpler characters are sometimes harder to act with?
Oh yeah. Yes and no.
Yeah. You go first, Rebecca.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, maybe no, because I remember the elves from Hilda were like extremely simple characters, but they were a lot of fun to work with. I think if it's like black pupils, it can be a little harder to work with. It's not impossible though.
I think you just have to develop a different sort of skill set. You're working with so much less information, so the decisions that you make in like the faintest shape change can carry a lot of weight. I had to do a scene where Charlie Brown is uncharacteristically confident and talking to Snoopy, and I got a lot of briefing on like, we never see Charlie Brown confident. He's always down on himself. And, like, how would he do it? Because it's like a new uncomfortable situation for him. He's being like a little bit cocky. His ego got a little bit big, and then Snoopy, just by being a dog, kind of bursts his bubble. So it was like very like slight little like melodramatic hand movements, but nothing too big. And for Charlie Brown specifically, unfortunately, it was all in profile, so I had even less to work with his face. But a huge thing for like subtle acting is head tilts.
Yep.
So as long as I could show that his head was tilting like up away from camera and tilting down towards camera, it really like carried his kind of cocky attitude for a little bit. But it is like so meticulous. I love it. It's my bread and butter. It's like the tiniest line stroke can adjust an expression so much, but that's kind of a cool power to have.
Mhm.
So I wanted to drill down and talk about process. Eden, what is your process for figuring out details about the characters and motivations that inform their performances?
So since I'm not just animating anymore, I have kind of a longer process than like when I was just animating. I find out like a character brief, a character side from the writer and the showrunner, and then from there, I usually like discuss with my teammates and the person who made the character, like what is the character's relationship, what is their status in the environment, like are they well off, are they powerful, just is someone else more powerful than them, how long have they known other people, do they admire anybody, are they anxious around anybody, and then from there I try and develop like shorthand emotional like cheats. So a show I worked on had a really loud, bombastic character, but talking to folks about him, it's like a mask he puts on. So he's big and showy and likes to be loud. And the cheat for him, for me, when I wanted it to be kind of like a devastating emotion for him, was make him really small, very quiet. The mask is gone. He's having a hard time feeling real feelings. But then we had another character who was also very loud and bombastic and very showy, but they kind of wore their heart on their sleeve. So knowing that information, it's not a mask. The cheat was when they're sad, they're big and loud and sad. Every emotion is very earnest. So figuring out like whether someone is like hiding stuff or how like honest they are kind of informs my decisions until the end. And then for like acting stuff, the nuts and bolts of it is how many head tilts can I get in there? How many eye darts is too much? Where would they dart their eyes? Would they tilt their head up and look down their nose at somebody? Would they like turn away but struggle to maintain eye contact? Those all have very different emotional weights to them. And once you can kind of like tie the tilting your head back and looking down your nose is someone who is maybe a little bit more cocky, where like tilting your head down, looking away and struggling to maintain eye contact is someone who is out of their depth, but still determined. Once you start building that library, it's kind of easy to just like pick and place and put it where it needs to be.
You know, I really like that answer because it gets at some of like the strengths of the medium of animation, like because you have so much control over the size of the characters and how things are in like framed in a composition, even more than you'd have in like traditional filmmaking, and you can really, really take advantage of all the things that make animation special, while also using that in service of like making the characters real and believable and conveyed to the audience. Rebecca, I wanted to ask you, what is your process for getting like into the headspace of these characters when you are trying to make these performances work?
Usually I'll try to figure out my own real life situations and apply that into the animation. The only downside is sometimes it can affect your mood if you go into too much. Like whenever I worked on sad scenes, I would like think of all the sad stuff that happened to me, and I'm like, oh, like it works, but then you kind of have to give yourself a mental break as well because too much sad stuff it can actually. Well, I find it affects me like in real life as well. So it's just all finding all about that balance. Because like for me, like I have to really I want to like understand the character and like where they're coming from. Not for every shot. Sometimes there's shots where they're super like, I'm gonna go this way. That's when I can just shut my brain off. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna quickly animate this and shoot it out. But then they're like, oh, I'm sad because of this, and I'm like, oh, why are they sad? And then I really try to like figure it out. Yeah, don't put all your emotions into every shot. You will mentally will be drained. But I say for like the very big important scenes, I do think it is important to really try to understand like where the character's coming from. Like, is there situations that happen to you that are similar? Like, do you feel this way? Like, and how did you resolve this, or how did you act?
Yeah, I think that's also a really good point, is that like animation is a medium of communication, and you're trying to show the audience something. And if you understand what it is that you're trying to show, it can really help a lot.
Yeah, like
Um,
I'll just like say like there were some shots in Hilda like in season 3 where I could really like feel the character's emotions, and there were some tears like being shed where I'm like, oh, because it wasn't even like super sad. It was just like the acting was just phenomenal.
it's really cool when you can like celebrate your colleagues' work and like say like, "Oh my God, they did such a great job on this." Rebecca, I wanted to ask you about something. So, many animators are drawn to what the cool kids are calling sakuga, often like really polished action scenes with like flips and explosions. But what can be challenging or interesting about the opposite, like really subtle character animation?
I could show you like this example right here where oops. Yeah, I'll just turn the audio off. Or do you want the audio on?
I don't think we can hear the audio,
Can you
so
not?
it's up to you.
No, no audio.
Oh, okay. So you can see in this shot, it's like really simple, but there's just so much going on. And I find like this stuff can be actually harder than action scenes, because with action scenes like you can just draw out the strong poses and kind of figure out like the in-betweens there. Here there's like only maybe one or two poses. Everything else is all really tiny subtle stuff. Like you see like her eyes are going down, but like her eyebrows are still like catching up. And then like you see like her mouth, like the tongue like just flicks a little, and it's just
Also, the shoulders too.
the shoulders, like it's just such like tiny action. And it's hard because sometimes I would try to do it with my stuff and it looks too tweeny, because like it's just, or it jitters. That's also another big problem. Sometimes with subtle animation you'll try something and it like you'll do it and it just jitters and it doesn't look good. And look at that, or like her hair strand is like just like falling through. There's a, like I find with subtle animation like there has to be a lot of follow through stuff too, like other things need to catch up,
Well,
like her.
I think like what you're getting at too is like when you have a character who's like flipping around, you are not like honed in on all like the smallest details. But when you
Hmm.
have a character where like a strand of hair is moving and their eyes darting back and forth a little bit and they're talking, like you
Hmm.
are focused on their face, you will notice if something is off.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, there's ton of action scenes where if you pause it, there's like big mistakes, but it's so fast, like no one notices it. With these things, you really like you can't get away with a lot of mistakes. Like things will pop and it will show. And I find that can be frustrating. It can be hard at times and very frustrating because I like to cheat. I like cheating. So
I mean, I think that's a good skill. However you get the final image, you got the image.
yeah, but with like subtle, slow stuff, you can't cheat. Like it can be a pain too, because really like when you're in the scene, you have to go frame by frame by frame to make sure everything's working.
Mm-hmm.
Like look, like her eyes just did a tiny little move, but it still works. Oh, that's a horse. But
Eden, I wanted to ask you, from your point of view, what can be challenging or interesting about subtle character acting in animation?
So to the point of like Sakuga, uh, for me, I love action anime and like big fights, but fights don't mean anything to me unless they're stakes, and you can only define stakes by getting a character invested in the fight. If you don't care about the character and what their motivations are, you're not really going to care about the fight. So I love action scenes, but they feel hollow when they aren't like bookended with really great character acting to get the audience invested in why should we care about this character? Why do we want them to win? Why do we want them to lose? But to the point of the challenging or interesting stuff about subtle acting, to Rebecca's point, the subtlety, the spacing is so tight that you have to be like so mindful of your fundamentals, basically, like really particular about your easing. You can't really let the computer drive. It's all you and your skills as an animator. And it's kind of tedious and exhausting, but also exhilarating when you figure it out, because it is like, it's not just strong poses. It's like the charm points. When Rebecca was talking about the hair falling into the face, I always tell people that's the charm point of the scene. Like, you need that in there. You need that specificity. You need that detail. And it's like, you get to put so much of yourself into the scene, like adding an extra eye wrinkle or like an extra like eyebrow furrow, adding the things that you think make an acting scene feel really soft and vulnerable or like ferocious and terrifying, maybe adding a little bit of gum when someone is talking. You don't always get to like live in that for that long in action scenes. I love strong poses. I love playing with timing and spacing when the contrast between poses is huge and fighting, but it's very fun to kind of like really live and dig into the tiny stuff, especially when it works out. With action scenes, the stuff that's tedious and difficult about it is like camera and staging and making sure things are hitting hard enough but aren't popping, which I think people kind of forget about because, like you were saying, it can kind of be easier to cheat because the spacing is so big. You can just like flip a character. Who cares? But they're both equally tedious, just in kind of different ways. And I think finding your love and passion for the things you enjoy in both will just make you a stronger animator. When you really invest in your skill in acting, you can sneak that stuff into the action scenes, and it makes them so much stronger and so much crazier. Like in a brief moment where someone gets thrown back and hits something, how do they react before they launch forward again? In those like 10 frames, what expression are you going to give them? That kind of stuff just makes your action scenes stronger. And yeah, I don't know. I love it all.
I mean, if a character gets knocked into a wall and you don't see how they react, how do you know how hard that was?
Yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to ask, Eden, in your opinion, what are some of the most important tools in an animator's utility belt when it comes to character animation? And I'm not talking about like software tools. I'm talking about things like pose, expression, timing, composition.
Yeah. I think like your fundamentals, as tedious as it sucks to hear all the time, but like understanding your fundamentals are always just going to make your scenes that much stronger. Going through your scene frame by frame and being like, did I get all the arcs in there that I should have? Did I make them deep enough? Are they following the right path? Really paying attention to your spacing, especially in subtle acting, can carry so much. Like when Rebecca was frame by framing through that Rapunzel scene, some things had in-betweens, some things didn't. Like eye darts with in-betweens, often terrible, but having them just pop faintly to the next position, way better. If you let the computer drive that, it's gonna feel soft and gooey. Posing is huge for me when I'm doing acting animation. The main things, like for body posing, is shoulders. That's like the big silhouette read for the audience, is how are the shoulders posed, and head tilts are huge. So to like figure out fast and dirty way of like, how do I get this acting scene more interesting? It feels kind of bland. Are they leaning forwards? Have they leaned back at all? Have they moved their shoulders at all in the scene? Have they tilted their head at all in the scene? Once you start adding those in, your acting scenes will be so much stronger.
I know with like this shot, like she doesn't. Well, she kind of has shoulders, but the shot, because it's like you only have maybe mainly the head to work with. This animator really like focused on the head tilts. Like you could see like just like it's just going forward and the tilts and stretch.
And her coming closer to camera each time feels more and more desperate. Instead of just going up and down, it's closer, closer.
Yeah, because I remember this shot really showed me like how much action, like how much emotion you can convey just with the head slightly going towards the camera. Because before I would kind of like just try to have my head go up and down. I'm like, it's not really working. Like
well,
right there.
I think what's also interesting too with that is like when you're working on an animated production, your characters might not be human, and you have to figure out how to convey human emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the horse.
And that's now.
I love these examples. So, Rebecca, was there anything else you wanted to mention in terms of tools that animators can use, such as like pose, expression, timing?
It's always the good old classic 12 principles that I go back to. It's so old-fashioned, but it like there are shots where you'll animate something, you're like, this doesn't look right, and then you sometimes if it's taking too long, I would say take a step back, maybe take a small walk, drink some water, and then like that's when you start to go through the list. You're like, okay, are the arcs good? Is the timing fine? Like posing, posing is also really strong, because if you're working with a bad pose, it's going to be frustrating for the entire scene. No matter how much you try to work with it, you're going to be like, this doesn't look right. And I will say, like, posing stage should take the longest. Animation should be not necessarily the quickest, but like I will say put most of your time into the posing, because it sucks if you have bad posing and then you do all the animation and then you're like, this sucks. And then it's because the posing didn't work in the first place. And like you said, like the shoulders, I forgot to mention the shoulders are huge, like acting possibilities. Although, like I said, sometimes you don't have shoulders to work with. Like this horse doesn't have like the shoulders to shimmy. It was, in this case, it was all about the eyes and like even her ears. Like she just like does a little tilt because she's upset in this shot. Oh, so if you guys haven't seen Centaur Road, you should go see it. It's really good.
Oh, it's an excellent show.
It's amazing. On your point about posing, like this is a simple pose, but
it's a very simple pose. But
the artist could have just made her completely front view, and it would have been a struggle to animate the scene.
Front view would have been awful.
But having her tilted ever so slightly quarter front, where you see her back hip on the screen left side.
Yeah.
Wow. Genius move.
I also wanted to drill down to something you said earlier, Eden, where you mentioned that sometimes like what you want to have is you want to have elements of a character snap instead of like ease or transition. And I think that's a really important thing to consider, because I've seen some like tech demos where like people are like, hey, we've interpolated this animation, so now it's 120 frames per second. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that better? And it's like,
it looks dumb.
Like sometimes animation needs to be snappy, you know, just having it like all be smooth is weird.
Oh, I hate it when they do it with Ghibli animation. It looks terrible.
Oh my god. The artists have put so much time and effort into considering where the drawings live in relation to each other, that just taking that out of their hands and being like, the smoother the better is like, now it feels gooey, it feels weightless. Like there's a reason that it worked in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
More drawings isn't always better.
It's that an AI animation
Ugh.
where they're like, "Look, I made this in 30 seconds. Isn't it cool?" And you're like, "This looks like."
It's just like this around face.
I'm like, maybe if they're
What's
like
your
on
life
a if they're like on an acid trip, that'd be kind of like interesting, but like it's not good. I don't like it.
So, Rebecca, I wanted to ask you, and I think you've shared some examples, but like, what are your favorite examples of like subtle character animation? What things have you seen throughout like your experience as an artist that made you go, "Wow, I want to do that"?
It always sounds like I'm just promoting Mercury, but literally all the shows I worked on is like stuff that's really good examples. But it's not even me promoting Mercury; it's like promoting the artists. Where I'm like, look what you can do with this animation and rigged animation at that.
Mm-hmm.
Klaus is also another really good movie I love to watch because that's all 2D drawn animation, and that's
It's
really
beautiful.
fun. It's gorgeous. I love studying that. Recently, Blue Eyed Samurai.
Mm-hmm.
It's 3D animation, but the acting is phenomenal. The story's great. Because normally, if something is an hour long, my attention span can't like really handle it. At first, I didn't want to watch it because I was like, an hour. I was like, that's too long. But like the entire time, it was just gorgeous. And like every shot looked like it should be on a poster.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up though, I think I'm trying to remember. Like I think it was like Nightmare Before Christmas. It was like definitely something that made me go, I want to work in this industry. Because I always
Jack is like such an expressive character too.
Oh, he's great. I remember I did try stop motion. I was like, this is too hard. It's so hard to do. Because it's all straight ahead. I don't know if it's different now, but I'm still pretty sure you can only animate doing straight ahead, which is harder because your animation can look goopy if you try doing it too much. I think straight ahead animation mainly only works with music video stuff and effects as well, and then stop motion. If there's anything else, people can correct me.
And Eden, what are your favorite examples of subtle character animation that you've seen?
Oh boy. I think what immediately comes to mind is like any of Satoshi Kon's work, just because he put so much like thought and energy and himself into each and every character. Like seeing him film himself and his crew was like for Tokyo Godfathers, them running in costumes. I was like, okay, I gotta try filming myself. If he can do it, I should try. But yeah, all of his work is incredible, and his characters are so like emotionally diverse, and they never fit into one small box. Like Millennium Actress, I forget the actual name, but that movie blew me away when I saw it the first time. And then other things that I think of, I love all of Mercury's stuff. They have like very soft but like beautifully timed things. The actions are soft, but they're not weightless or gooey. Like it's the amount of effort you have to put into to get movement that delicate without it becoming like you're watching slime slide across the screen is insane. Like the understanding of like timing and spacing for Mercury stuff is wild. I do want to promote the Peanut specials on Apple because Wildbrain did those, and I know the crew like put everything they could into making these like very minimalistic ink drawing characters have like very deep, complicated children emotions, which are like oftentimes so much harder to figure out and nail down than an adult's feelings. So I love watching the Peanut specials on that Wildbrain did, because you've got like Charlie Brown's little sister who feels things wildly different than Charlie Brown, and how she moves is wildly different, even though they're basically the same shape. It's very good.
So you both have experience with 2D rigged productions. So I wanted to ask you, like, what do you look for in a 2D rig when approaching scenes that rely on subtle character acting, and like, how does that inform the decisions you can make?
You want to go first, Rebecca?
No, I was hoping you go first.
Okay. Okay. So for me, it really okay. Let me get my thoughts in order. A big thing in like what I love to see when I'm opening up a rig for the first time for like character acting is if the rig already has some basic head tilts posed into it, but that comes from like design or potentially an animation supervisor. I've had to do that a couple times, but you're not always going to get that. So within a team, having people work together to build that head tilt library saves a ton of time. So if you can have a rig that has head tilts preset in to give you like a jumping off point, makes it so much faster, especially for people new to the industry who are like trying to learn model, trying to learn software, trying to learn deadlines. Just having a jumping off point makes it so much better for them. And a big thing for me is lots of different studios have different ways that they recreate, reuse animation, and some studios have rules about not breaking the rig, just so reuse can be copy pasted a lot more easily.
Mhm.
So if a studio has that kind of rule, I really appreciate it when they have just empty drawings pre-built into the rig that like follow the head peg, follow the hand pegs, follow the eye pegs, just so when it comes down to it, I don't have to break the rig to add in some extra like stress lines around the eyes or add extra pieces to like add some like if you're doing like a fighting show, some grime on someone's face or something like that. Or with Rapunzel, with her hair falling in her face, just having some empty drawings pegged and built into the hair section gives you the ability to add those little charm points of like hair falls into the face cutely or like sweatily and they're all like angry, that kind of stuff. Giving animators more flexibility in adding things in to make a scene more specific is what I look for.
Mhm.
So, rigging artists, if you're really trying to impress productions with your demos, definitely look at those as elements you can include. Rebecca, is there anything else that you'd add?
Um, you said it like everything you said. That's why I want you to go first because I was like, I don't really know how to answer it. I would say though, I remember for rigged animation, people would get annoyed because I would often just draw new parts for myself. But then, but then people are like, I tried copying and pasting your rig and it didn't work. And I was like, oh, it's because I drew like the eye by myself. Because I will say there's sometimes the way eyes were rigged, I personally didn't like the way they were done. I know like a lot of people like obviously like this, like people can work with it. For me, I'd be like, I'm just gonna draw like an eye with this expression already instead of trying to fiddle with the deformers trying to make it work. But then later, someone else would try to like copy and paste like my scene because let's say the characters matched up, then they're like, "Oh my god, it like exploded because it didn't work." Um,
Yeah, I think that can always be like a difficult trade-off to make
Yeah.
because sometimes you really just got to go in there, and if you need it for the scene, uh, you can always draw.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think the rig should serve the animation choices. Sometimes you have to break the rig a little bit. And like
Yeah.
there's ways to get that copied into other scenes. It's not as seamless as copy paste special, but you can do it. It just takes a little bit more time. Sometimes it's good to break the rig. Don't kill me, riggers.
I will say though, some shots like I do say try to stick to the rig because
Yes.
if especially if you're running out of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like a walk cycle, don't break that, please.
No, God, no. Like
Try to
very specific, like huge out of style cartoony expressions where you're like, I need these eyes to go past the head, and the basic rig has a cutter that prevents me from doing that. I'm just going to make new eyes instead of messing with the rig. It's still kind of breaking it, but a little bit more cleverly.
Yeah, I remember being like brand new, and I did not know what cutters were, so I was like, "Why doesn't the eye go above the head?" And they're like, "Oh, it's because it's cutting into the head." I'm like, "What is that?" Yeah, I remember just being like going from drawing on paper, just
Yeah.
thrown onto Toon Boom, and they're like, "Okay, here's your shots. Good luck." And I'm like, "What? What is this?"
Mhm.
Because I will say, Toon Boom is not very it's not friendly to new beginners. I always tell people that. I'm like, once you learn it, it's amazing. You'll never
Oh
want to
yeah.
go. You'll never go back.
Yeah.
But
Just a lot to learn.
I definitely understand. For a new person, it can be very scary.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I don't think that you're wrong. I think that Harmony is software that gives experienced artists and animators a lot of control,
Mhm.
but it also gives artists and animators a lot of control, and sometimes that can be scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can affect everything.
Huh?
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Rebecca, I wanted to ask you, do you have advice for animators who want to improve things that they can practice to improve their subtle acting?
Um, for me, I always say like just do a headshot. Like for me, like for this character, like if you could get a shot, like if you just from the shoulder, from the head to the shoulder, see how much you can work with. And really short stuff. Like I know so many people, they're like, I'm trying to animate like a 5 minute cartoon, and then they're like, it's too much. I'm like, literally, do like 10 seconds. Can you convey something? Or a minute. I say if if you can convey a message within a minute, that's very impressive.
Mhm.
Rather than 5 minutes of like blah animation because you're rushing to get it done. And
Eh, eh,
just try
sorry,
stuff out. Oh,
I just wanted to mention this is the gesture character that you made for that short project, right?
yeah, this is my character. I've already changed. Like I did this animation for fun, just to test stuff out.
Mhm.
Um, to see what I like, what I don't like about the design and the animation style. Um, that's the thing. To test things out. I have so many shots of my characters in different styles, different animation like techniques that I would try. And some things I'm like, okay, this looks good, and then I would try other shots and I'm like, this looks terrible. And then but I don't regret doing it. It's me, like I did it. I saw what worked and I knew what didn't work, what was really frustrating, and then I would use that for the next round. It's just testing, 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 testing. Um, and I would say try to use your own characters because I find it's more fun when it's something that's yours.
And Eden, do you have advice for animators who want to improve at scenes with subtle acting?
I think Rebecca's suggestion of taking like a head and shoulder shot and just running through it, like running through your fundamentals, making sure like you animate it once, look through it, looking at your fundamentals, look through it, being like, could they lean forward here? Think about Z depth of the character, and then also like do just different runs of my first instincts, looking at my fundamentals, looking at have I included the shoulders? Did I move the brows enough? Did I tilt the head enough? That's a very like good nuts and bolts way of getting into it. For acting specific stuff, like to plus up your understanding of acting and feel more confident in making acting choices that are character specific. I think when you're watching things, this is what I do anyways with like my husband and my friends. When we watch things, I love to talk afterwards about like I like how this character expressed anger in this way juxtaposed against this other character who felt anger in like a couple scenes later, and like talk about the differences and how long it took them to reach that point of anger, whether they were like more animalistic and like leaning more in towards camera, or more like crushing in on themselves angry, and just finding fun and joy and just goofing around and analyzing characters and stuff that you liked. It's good to be like, I loved this show, but you'll learn more when you start to be like, but why did I love it? Why did I like that scene? And looking at it from like these drawings are beautiful. Are they beautiful not only because they're appealing, or are they beautiful because where that character's making eye contact feels more devastating? Mm-hmm. Why does it feel more devastating? So just deep diving into your favorite stuff is a blast, and then you get to gush with your friends about your favorite little characters and all the difficult situations they're in.
I would say make sure your friends actually enjoy talking about it too.
Don't corner someone and be like, talk about my blurbo with me. Don't do that.
One of the things I just want to highlight too, like moving in Z depth, I think is a really important thing to practice with animation, because I think with 2D animation, it can be really easy to take like the 2D of a character at face value. But just because the artwork is 2D doesn't mean that your character has to be trapped on like a 2D plane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can get closer to the camera, they can move farther away.
Yeah. Like pushing that hand way closer to the camera instead of having it here, like close as you possibly can.
And then if you know how to do comp, it's really fun, because then you could like start adding blurs. Like I had one shot, I think, where
rack focus.
A little bit. Oh, where is he? Because like I had the blur here. And
nice rack focus.
Yeah, it was just me practicing. Like this animation's not perfect. There's definitely stuff where I'll go back. I'm like, I definitely could improve like on this and that. But that's the thing. Like, it's my animation. It was me practicing, and I like showing to people, and they're like, yeah, this is really cool, and it's just fun. And yeah, there's stuff like you're always gonna improve, and never be embarrassed to show your stuff to people.
Yeah,
and always know, like, within maybe even a month, sometimes I'll look back at my stuff where I'm like, oh, I definitely could have made this better, but I'm not gonna dwell on it. I'm not gonna be like, oh, I wish I never posted it. It's like, no, cool, now I can go forward and keep learning.
I think that being able to like look at your own work and say, oh, I could have improved, you know, X, Y, and Z, being able to be critical means that you're going to improve a lot faster than someone who produces the same quality of work and then doesn't look at it again.
Yeah.
Oh, I look.
Sorry, I was going to say, we are running out of time, so I just wanted to ask you both, where can our audience find more of your work across the web?
You can find me at Eden Tim everywhere. I think I'm the only Eden Tim. So it's very easy to find me.
Except no substitutes.
Yes.
Same here. Rebecca Kartsmark, because Kartsmark is like not a very common name. Just put that on Twitter. Because I have a Wix website too, but I haven't updated that in 6 years, so don't use that.
When you said same, I thought you'd be like, I'm also at Eden Tim.
No!
We're all Tim.
Oh my god.
So thank you, Eden and Rebecca, for joining us for today's live stream discussion on subtle character animation. And thank you to our audience for tuning into our live stream. If you'd like to practice animation using industry standard animation tools, you can download a 21-day trial of Harmony from our website. The website is toonboom.com. We'll be taking a couple weeks off the live stream over the holiday break, but we'll be back in January with new interviews and art streams. And with that out of the way, we hope that you have a Merry Christmas, a superb solstice, a Happy New Year, a happy belated Hanukkah, a Festivus for the rest of us, and be sure to tune in next time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
This is so fun.